Hello everyone, we are back with part 3 of Women on Death Row in the US. Let's see what they did to deserve this punishment. Maureen McDermott, 32 years on death row in the state of California. In order to obtain mortgage insurance on a home they jointly owned, McDermott, 37 years old, a former nurse, paid an orderly at the hospital where she worked to murder her male roommate, Stephen Eldridge, 27 years old. McDermott and Eldridge both purchased a $100,000 life insurance policy in December 1984, naming the other as beneficiary. Their bond weakened around the beginning of 1985. Eldridge expressed concern about the defendant's animals as well as the untidy state of the home, Eldridge's handling of McDermott's pets, and his intentions to sell his stake in the property upset McDermott. In February 1985, McDermott offered Jimmy Luna $50,000 to murder Eldridge, and he agreed. They decided to not use a gun so that they would not make a lot of noise and opted for stabbing instead. Thinking of ways to make sure the police would not look into it too much, they tried to make it look like Eldridge was gay. Luna requested Marvin Lee's assistance in the murder in March 1985. He offered Marvin $3,000 to watch his back and claimed that a group wanted someone killed. Marvin agreed. After a failed attempt to commit the crime while Eldridge managed to escape and take shelter at a neighbor's house, a fourth person joined the group. This was Marvin's brother Dondell. On the day of the murder, April 28, 1985, Luna, Marvin, and Dondell entered the home through the front bedroom window around 8:15 p.m. Eldridge had not yet arrived from a dinner appointment. In order to give the impression that Eldridge was killed when he returned home while McDermott was being robbed, she instructed Luna to slash her on the breast and inner thigh, which he did. Eldridge arrived home at about 10:40 p.m. Dondell met him inside the home with a firearm that belonged to McDermott but had been given to him by Luna. Eldridge was then taken down the hallway by Marvin Lee in a chokehold, where he was repeatedly stabbed by Luna until he collapsed to the ground. After that, Luna went back to Maureen McDermott's room, where he discovered her on the floor with a facial wound. After telling Luna that she had hit her head on the bedside table, Maureen McDermott asked if the wound looked convincing. Marvin heard McDermott yell from the rear bedroom not to forget to remove Eldridge's private parts as Luna and the two Lee brothers were ready to leave the residence. Luna did as he was told. Eldridge had received 44 stab wounds. 28 of the 44 stab wounds were lethal on their own. Luna was detained on May 23, 1985 for questioning, but he was freed after 72 hours. He was detained again on July 2, 1985 for the first-degree murder of Eldridge. Maureen McDermott was also detained in August 1985. Marvin Lee, who was being held for a separate crime, was given immunity in return for confessing to the murder of Eldridge and giving an accurate account. Dondell Lee received immunity in August 1986 while under the California Youth Authority's care. Luna entered into a plea deal in July 1989 when he admitted culpability to first-degree murder and promised to give an accurate account of his actions in Maureen McDermott's prosecution. Michelle Lynn Michaud, 20 years on death row in the state of California. Michaud and her partner, James Anthony DeVeggio, were found guilty of luring a 22-year-old lady into a van that had been specifically modified, torturing and killing her, and then leaving her body on a snowy slope. While Vanessa Leigh Sampson was traveling to her job at an insurance firm, the couple kidnapped her and abused her with 2 modified curling irons, and in the end they used the rope to strangle her. The victim's body was found 2 days later. The following day, DeVeggio and Michaud were detained in connection with an assault they had committed against a student at the Reno Community College 3 months previously. The two allegedly essayed a number of girls and young women over the course of their 13-month relationships in 1996 and 1997, according to the prosecution, who said the act was a part of a binge of total depravity. Michaud's own daughter and one of her friends, who were just 12 and 13 years old at the time, have been essayed by the pair in 1997. DeVeggio's 16-year-old daughter and her 17-year-old friend were also victims of essay committed by the two. Look, this case is pretty bad, and the fact that they didn't even respect their own kids is baffling. I think I shared my thoughts several times in the comment section regarding children that go through these situations. And if there is any type of criminal that I have no sympathy for, is one that has no boundaries when it comes to kids. I don't care if there's a mental illness that causes these actions. Kids should always be protected. Tanya Nelson, 13 years on death row in the state of California. After visiting a fortune teller in California, Tanya Jamie Nelson killed the woman and her daughter when her prediction did not come true. According to court records, Nelson was in California when she sought advice from a fortune teller about whether she should move her company from North Carolina to California. When she did, the move failed and Nelson became enraged. On April 22, 2005, the bodies of Jade Smith, 52 years old, and Anita Nevo, a 23-year-old college student, were discovered in Mrs. Smith's Little Sagan residence. They had numerous stab wounds to their faces and necks which caused their death. Furthermore, both of them had cuts on their hands, indicating that they had made an effort to fend off the attackers. The reason why over a gallon of white paint had been splashed over their heads and hands was what confused the officers the most. A worried friend who had not heard from the victims called the Westminster Police Department on April 22nd. When the police arrived at the house, they saw what happened there. After buying plane tickets using the victims' credit cards, Nelson went on a shopping spree at South Coast Plaza in Orange County in May 2005. On May 30th of that year, she was taken into custody by Westminster police detectives at the Holiday Inn in Santa Ana. At the time of her arrest, she was in possession of the stolen credit cards, IDs, and expensive luggage of the victims. On June 1st, 2005, Nelson's accomplice Zamora was detained at his residence in North Carolina as well. Angelina Rodriguez, 19 years on death row in the state of California. Rodriguez was found guilty of killing her spouse with Gatorade laced with antifreeze. She apparently tried to kill him numerous times before with no result. A $250,000 life insurance coverage served as her motivation. She was found guilty of threatening a witness who she had told about her murderous plans for Frank. Rodriguez attempted to murder her husband only 3 months after they got married. The first time, according to the authorities, she fed him oleander plants that were poisonous, causing him to become ill. After that, she allegedly opened the gas cap on the dryer before departing to go see a friend in San Luis Obispo. Rodriguez ended up adding doses of green antifreeze to her husband's Gatorade. She called her insurance company a few hours after her husband passed away, but the representative informed her that she wouldn't get any money until the coroner determined the cause of death. Prosecutors said that she later called an investigator and claimed to have received an anonymous call claiming that her spouse had been poisoned with antifreeze. According to phone records, she never received such a call. Now, Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney Doug Sortino had the best take on this situation. Her relentlessness in her effort to pursue her goals was matched only by her stupidity. Additionally, the prosecution produced evidence that Rodriguez killed her child in 1993 by smashing a pacifier and forcing a piece of it down the infant's throat before filing a lawsuit against the pacifier's maker. She got over $400,000 compensation out of that trial. Rodriguez argued before the judge that she had not committed the crime and that Frank must have drunk the antifreeze on his own, but the defense attorney told the press after the hearing that he couldn't come up with much of a defense on the guilt-innocence question. Brooke Marie Rottiers, 12 years on death row in the state of California. Rotiers, her boyfriend Omar Tyree Hutchinson, and a female friend of theirs collaborated to lure 2 men aged 22 and 28 years old in a hotel room to rob them. Once in the room, at gunpoint, Rotiers instructed them to take their clothes off before tying them up and robbing them. Then, using women's lingerie and electrical cables, she battered and strangled them. The prosecution did not pursue the death penalty for the other 2 accomplices, as they participated by threatening the men and helped dispose of the bodies, but Rotiers was the one who committed the crimes. Mary Samuels, 28 years on death row in the state of California. In order to get rid of her 40-year-old husband, who she was divorcing, Samuels hired a hitman and she was found guilty. Additionally, she was found guilty of ordering the hitman's death. Mary Samuels killed Robert Samuels for money, including $240,000 in insurance, $70,000 from the Subway sandwich shop that they continued to jointly own despite going through a divorce, and $160,000 from the refinancing of the couple's home. She was dubbed the Green Widow by police and prosecutors after spending almost all of the money in less than a year. A male companion's photo from some time after the killings was produced as evidence and showed Samuels in bed, completely covered in cash. On December 8, 1988, Robert Samuels was shot in the back of the head at his Northridge home. According to the evidence, the alleged hitman bought a $25,000 life insurance policy the day after Samuel's body was discovered, listing Samuel's daughter Nicole as the beneficiary. The hitman was in fact engaged to Nicole Samuels. He was found dead, strangled, battered, and abandoned alongside the road in a remote Ventura County canyon 7 months later. Mary Samuels hired Paul Edwin Gall and Darrell Ray Edwards to commit the crime. Cathy Lynn Sarinana, 13 years on death row in the state of California. Sarinana and her husband Raul were found guilty of the deaths of Conrad Morales, 13 years old, and Ricky Morales, 11 years old. The boys were Raul's nephews and they were under the couple's care. Brothers Ricky and Conrad Morales were raised in a family and environment that made it almost impossible for them to succeed. They and their siblings were continuously being taken into protective custody by CPS, as their mother was not able to take care of them since she had an addiction. Conrad Morales, age 13, was transferred to live with his convicted felon uncle Raul and his wife Cathy Sarinana in Randall, Washington, when his mother, Rosa Morales, was given a jail sentence for narcotics offenses. Ricky, who was 10 years old, was transferred to live with his grandmother. Ricky did not get along with grandma and was consequently ordered to join his brother in Washington. Within a short period of time, the boy's sister, the police, and the neighborhood people discovered that Conrad and Ricky were both victims of physical and abuse. Conrad was enrolled in school even though Ricky never was. Conrad began concealing his wounds with makeup according to his classmates and alleged that his uncle hit him. Ricky requested to be permitted to visit his aunt's house on Christmas morning by calling their residence. The family started to plan his trip, but sadly it never happened. On December 25, 2005, Ricky Morales was lying in a closet, dying of severe internal injuries. Raul Sarinana kicked and trashed Ricky for cleaning a bathroom too slowly, then went on to have his Christmas dinner. When Cathy decided to check on the boy hours later, she found him dead, so she called the police. A second sibling, who was just so happened to be absent, was subsequently reported to the police. When they got back to the Sarinana house, they discovered Conrad's body. It had been kept on the carport of their house, placed inside a trash can that was sealed with plastic and duct tape, then buried in concrete. Raul acknowledged that Conrad passed away on or around August 22, 2005. Following a period of discipline. He admitted to the police that he invented the story of an older gay lover that possibly took the boy to cover up the murders as the family started to show signs of suspicion. When the family relocated from Washington to California after this incident, they took the boy's body with them to the new house. Around this time is when they started debating whether Ricky needed to be killed also because he had seen his brother's murder. Ricky's autopsy revealed evidence of significant mistreatment in the past, including old fractures, bruises, and what seemed to be cigarette burns all over his body. He had also been assayed, and what happened to him was so graphic that I just can't talk about it here. But you can Google it if you want to know more. Witnesses claim to have seen Ricky being abused by both Raul and Cathy. According to reports, Cathy treated Ricky like a personal slave and demanded that he cleaned up after her and her kids. Police and neighbors said that while the Sarinanas and their 2 children did not exhibit any signs of malnutrition, the boys got thin. Raul and Cathy were each charged with first-degree murder and child endangerment with the additional accusation of torturing Ricky before his death. Cathy has said that she suffered from battered wife syndrome and that she was unaware of any abuse or maltreatment of either Ricky or Conrad. Despite the fact that Raul had admitted giving Ricky the beating that killed him, he maintains that the death was an accident and wasn't his doing. Both Raul and Cathy Sarinana were sentenced to death. Janine Snyder, 16 years on death row in the state of California. When Michelle Caron was taken from her Las Vegas neighborhood in late March 2001, she was just 16 years old. Her naked body was found inside a horse trailer near Ruby Doo 2 weeks later. She had been essayed, bound, and shot by Janine Snyder and Michael Thornton. At the trial, 2 teenage girls gave testimony about how Snyder lured them to a hotel where Thornton abused them. A 14-year-old girl who had been missing for more than 5 years was among the victims Snyder admitted to killing. Janine Snyder, who lived with Thornton after experiencing issues with her own family, was a friend of Thornton's daughter. According to a testimony from Thornton's ex-wife, she overheard him discussing an incident about a little girl who was killed and her body was dissected before being thrown into the ocean. Snyder would make friends with females and bring them to Thornton's house or motels. According to evidence, Thornton and Snyder imprisoned the teenage girls against their will while abusing them and feeding them a constant diet of methamphetamine. If the girls complained to anyone or asked to go home, the pair would threaten to kill them. Due to a lack of evidence, Thornton and Snyder were never prosecuted with any crimes in relation to the earlier kidnappings. Manling Tsang Williams, 11 years on death row in the state of California. In 2007, Williams was found guilty of killing her husband in their Rowland Heights home and suffocating her 2 small children with a pillow. Her motivation was a narcissistic, selfish, and juvenile desire to begin a new life with another guy, away from the constraints of family life, according to the records. Manlyn Williams had reconnected with an old buddy on the internet in the months prior to the killings and had started dating him. The judge emphasized that if Manlyn Williams had chosen to just abandon the children, there were many family members who would have been able to take care of them. Neil Williams, her husband, was stabbed and sliced more than 97 times in the attack after Devon and Ian were strangled in their bunk bed, according to authorities. She mercilessly, brutally, and ruthlessly attacked her husband with a katana sword, they claimed. The court remarked that Neil begged for help in his closing moments. She attacked her spouse while wearing latex gloves. According to testimony, it takes 5 to 10 minutes for someone to suffocate to death. Therefore, Manlyn Williams had at least 5 minutes to think through what she was doing before killing her other kid the same way. The court claimed that after the killings, Manlyn Williams wrote a note saying that Neil Williams had killed the kids and himself. She threw away bloody garments and then went back home before yelling to the neighbors that someone had slain her family. Detectives interviewed her for hours after the deaths were found, while she pretended to be distraught, sorrowful, and confused. Tiffany Moss, 4 years on death row in the state of Georgia. In 2019, Moss was found guilty of starving and torturing to death her 10-year-old stepdaughter, Emani Moss, in 2013. Emani was violently abused by Moss for several years before her demise. She was starved by Moss starting 2013. Emani's absentee father did nothing to halt the abuse. She passed away on October 28, 2013, from malnutrition. At the time of her death, she weighed 32 pounds, which is around 15 kilograms, and this is the weight of a typical toddler. I will post a separate dedicated video about this case. There are too many details and pieces of info that have to be discussed so that a full picture is painted about what this little girl had to go through. This video will be posted on Monday, January 2nd, so for those of you who want to know more about this, I'll see you then. That was it for today, guys. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas with all your loved ones around you. Part 4 will be up on Wednesday and the final Part 5 will be up on Friday. Until then, go watch this video about Carl Tanzler. You'll see how far people can go when they have an obsession for someone. Comment on that video the word red if you watch it because you found it through this video. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.